The Higher Ed Marketer podcast is sponsored by the Zemi app, enabling colleges and universities to engage interested students before they even apply.
You're listening to The Higher Ed Marketer, a podcast geared towards marketing professionals in higher education. This show will tackle all sorts of questions related to student recruitment, donor relations, marketing trends, new technologies, and so much more. If you're looking for conversations centered around where the industry is going, this podcast is for you. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer podcast. I'm Troy Singer here with Bart Kaler. Today, we interview Chris Bender, who is the Assistant Dean for Communications for the A. James Clark School of Engineering at the University of Maryland. And if you have a conversation with Chris, his overall value that he will bring to that conversation is convincing marketers that they should speak and think more strategically instead of tactically. And he makes a great case for this within our podcast today.
Yeah, Troy, I really enjoy the conversations with Chris. I mean, this is, we've had several conversations with him leading up to this podcast recording, but he's so articulate and thoughtful in what he brings to the table, and I really appreciate his desire not only for himself but for really kind of illustrating it by example of really trying to be more strategic in the way that he does all of his work, whether it's in the way he describes the management style that he has with his team, or whether he's describing how to communicate the impact that the marketing is making to various constituents on campus. I really think he brings a lot to the table. I would encourage you to kind of listen to this, and he has some resources that he points out, a couple television shows that he encourages everyone to watch, as well as a book or two that he might mention as well. But it's such a rich conversation, and again, we're kind of taking it to a strategic level on the way that we think about strategy today. So there's not going to be a lot of tactics that you're going to walk away with, but there's plenty of notes that you can take on how to be a better higher ed marketer.
Here's our conversation with Chris Bender. We really appreciate Chris coming on the podcast and being willing to share his opinion and knowledge of why marketers should think more strategically. But Chris, before we go into the conversation, if you would, please share something new and interesting that you've learned recently.
Okay, I have a random one. So this is for anybody that has houseplants. So in our home, we have approximately 10 or so houseplants. And this is whittled down from a much higher number. This was a long negotiation process with my wife, but we're down to 10. Anyway, so there's a plant in our bedroom that has what plant people, I didn't know, but I now know as spider mites. And they're these tiny, tiny, tiny bugs. And I had no idea how to get rid of them. And I thought I was going to have to get rid of this plant, which I sort of like. But it turns out you can treat the plant with a little bit of alcohol. Like you put it on a Q-tip and then you rub the leaf and then you wash it off. And I had no idea you could do that. I thought alcohol was too abrasive for a plant, but kudos to one of my coworkers, Olga. She sort of turned me on to this solution, and now the plant is in much better shape, so it will stay.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, that is wonderful. And at the end of the podcast, when you give your contact information, it's not only for higher ed marketing, but it's also for growing plants.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you would, tell us a little bit about your role at the University of Maryland.
Sure. So I'm the Assistant Dean for Communications, and I am really fortunate to work with a super talented team of individuals. They are all really good at what they do. They're all committed. We have a pretty flat way of operating in that, at the end of the day, if the decision needs to get made, the people that know who need to make those decisions make the decisions. But there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of discussion. We talk a lot about what we think is the right thing to do. I as a management philosophy, more a facilitation philosophy, have this belief that you get the best ideas when you get the people in the room. And so I think my job is a couple-fold. I think one is to provide strategic direction for the team. The team rightfully is very focused on, what are we going to do this week or what are we going to do this month? And I think my job is to sort of push us all to think about where do we want to be in 6 or 12 months. And then how do we link the day-to-day work that we're doing to that 6 to 12-month goal? I think, two, it's to be a strategic advisor to leadership. So if a slippery situation comes up or an opportunity comes up, to offer the best advice from the communications perspective about the right way to manage it. I think, three, it's to represent what we do both internally and externally. And I think externally it's opportunities like this, but I think internally, a lot of times, and we could talk about this more, communicators, not just in education, but generally, I think, don't sell themselves as powerfully as they could. And so I think part of my job is to really make sure that our internal clients, internal partners, understand what we do, understand the value that we provide, understand how we work, and understand how best to work with us and how we could best work with them. And I think the last thing is to keep an eye on what's going on in the world, not just, in communications, but generally, what are the trends, what's hot, what are people talking about, where are they getting information, and seeing what we can learn for those things and bringing them to the table. And I think all that is sort of wrapped around making sure that the group feels, valued, respected, like we're meeting their needs for performance on the job, like we're thinking about work-life balance, that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Chris. And I think you've mentioned a lot that we can touch on during our time together. The first thing I wanted to ask you is about differentiation. I know a lot of higher ed marketers think it's hard to differentiate themselves from other schools, and would love to get your philosophy on how marketers could better do that.
So, yeah, I think you hit upon it, right? The way I try to think about it is that at the end of the day, all of us are doing sort of the same thing. Whether you work at a small liberal arts institution or whether you work at a big R1 engineering institution, we're all trying to sell our ideas into the marketplace. And if you think about, your audience is a bullseye, everyone is trying to get their arrow into the middle of the bullseye. So you have to be thinking about, what's going to make my arrow faster or bigger or come from a different angle. And I think the first way to do that is research. You've got to have a really good understanding of what's happening around you. So me as an example, I need to know what the other Big 10 plus engineering schools are doing from a marketing perspective. And I need to learn from that. And if I know that we're competing for the same talent pool, whether it's students or faculty or staff or speakers or donors or whatever, I need to be thinking about how can we position ourselves in a way that is unique and different and more powerful. I think a second thing is really thinking about trends that happen outside of education that can influence what we do education. I think it's easy, whatever industry you're in, right? If you're in healthcare, I think in healthcare communications, I think it's easy to get trapped in only looking at what's happening in healthcare communications. If you're in hospitality communications, I think it's easy to get trapped in looking at what the other big hotel chains are doing. But I think to be really good at what all of us do, you've got to be able to take a step back and say, what's moving the needle these days? What is unique? What is different? What are people tuning into? And how can we jump on some of those trends? Or how can we utilize the lessons from those trends in a way that works really well for us in communications? I will give you a quick example if you don't mind.
Please.
So we just opened this fantastic facility called the Idea Factory that's going to be home to robotics research, quantum research, autonomous systems research, so on and so forth. And at the dedication event, which was in May, we did this video, this kind of 2 to 3 minute video tour of the facility. And we talked a lot about how to do it, but I had watched Hard Knocks with the Dallas Cowboys the previous summer. Now, I'm a San Diego Chargers fan. Notice I said San Diego, not LA. But I bring this up because, it's sort of a ritual in our house that, come football season, we watch Hard Knocks. And at the beginning of the second or third episode of Hard Knocks from the Cowboys season, there is a drone fly through of the facility where the Cowboys practice. And it is amazing. I would encourage everybody to watch it. It's like 3 minutes, and the drone just does not stop. It goes in the door, it goes around the practice facility, it goes in the weight room. It's incredible. And I had this idea that why don't we do that for the Idea Factory? Because Like drones are trending, it's interesting, it pulls people in, and I don't get the credit for executing it. Our videographer Lee did all the hard work. But I think the point of the matter is the idea came from a totally different place. And we brought it into education and used it in a way that was powerful. So it's just an example to say, like, look around, see what's happening around you, see what's interesting, see what's unique, see what turns your head, and then try to pull some of those things in. Some of them will work, some of them won't, but be open to experimenting, I think.
I love that idea, Chris. And I think that, a lot of times I'll tell my clients to take a look at, what's Target doing? What's happening out there in, similar industries that are, targeting, Generation Z or your potential students. I mean, look at what Apple's doing. I mean, Apple has been, utilizing the iPhone and, back in the day when they were, doing the iPod and things like that, they had a very unique perspective on how to market to the same, age frame. And so I think a lot of times we can do that, take a nod from what's going on in corporate, take a nod in what's going on in social. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there that many times I think as higher ed marketers, we kind of tend to start looking too closely to our belly buttons and not really looking out beyond the education area.
I think part of it too is thinking about the work that we do in a different frame. So as an example, I think a lot of times, again, regardless of what aspect of communications you're in, if you're in telecom, you think about, we're gonna market a telecom story. We're selling telecom products. Or if you're in education, we're trying to get people to come here, and that's true. But I think again, it's like, okay, take that step back and say to yourself, well, what are we really doing here? And to me, I think regardless of whether you're in, again, telecom or hotels or communications for education, like we all are, like you're selling an idea, right? And the idea for us in engineering education is that this is a place where you can have access to, the most cutting edge, interesting people, research facilities that are going to give you the tools to go change the world. Like that's the idea. And if you step back and say to yourself, okay, so how do companies or how do think tanks or how do other education institutions sell ideas? That's really, there are probably plenty of people that do that, but I would challenge people to say, like, think about it that way. Like you're selling an idea, you're selling a concept, and that is the concept. And then what do you need to do tactically to drive that?
Yep.
If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And one of the shows I enjoy watching sometimes when I'm traveling is Shark Tank. And I think that, the idea of how they're pitching their ideas, how they're expressing themselves with these new things, I think there's a lot that can be gathered from that and learned.
Yeah.
I know you had referenced the reality show The Pitch from AMC in our early pre-conversation. And since then, I've watched a few episodes of that. And I think that gets some different brain cells moving as well. And maybe tell me a little bit about your experience with watching that, because I think you applied some of the thinking with that on that particular pilot episode.
Yeah, so first of all, I would encourage everybody as a laundry folding show to watch The Pitch. If you don't know about The Pitch, it's a show on AMC that ran right about the Mad Men timeframe. So, everyone knows about Mad Men. And if you don't, then stop watching right now and go watch Mad Men and then come back to this podcast. Although YouTube probably won't like what I said that. The Pitch is a reality show about marketing firms, advertising agencies. And the concept basically is that there's a client at the beginning of the show that's got a marketing problem or an advertising problem. 2 advertising agencies are brought in to try and figure out a solution. The show catalogs all of the creative development they do. And then at the end, they both pitch and somebody wins. The reason, clearly I like it because this is what we do and it's interesting. But the other reason I like it is like you get a bird's eye view as to how other people approach the same challenges. So it's a learning opportunity from the standpoint of watching other people be creative, watching how other teams work, watching how people collaborate. And like you could draw things that you think are relevant into your work. But to the point, you were just making, Bart. So the first episode, and I have to give a spoiler, I'm so sorry. But the first episode is about Subway. And, Subway is in this episode really trying to think about how to sell its breakfast products. And 2 firms come in. And one firm does this whole like zombie thing, right? They do this, it's called Zambies. It's like breakfast and zombies, and it's great. First of all, it's great today, I think, but it was at the time when all the zombies were the rage, and so it's timely. This other firm came in and they did this campaign that, if I remember, it was called like Let's Remake Breakfast. And you watch the show, and I admit I was convinced the zombie firm was going to win. Now maybe this shows that I'm totally like shallow and was all into that trend or whatever, but the other firm won. And after the show, Tony Pace, who was the guy at that point that was the CMO for Subway, talked about, you got to go with the durable idea. And it really stuck with me, because I think what we have to be able to do is find an idea that is both breakthrough and durable. Something that punches through, punches up, gets out of the clutter, gets into the center of that bullseye, whatever you want to say, and at the same time, like, sticks with people. And again, I think it goes back to that original point we were talking about 10 or so minutes ago. At some level, all of the work that we do is similar, just like all of the work that hotel marketing is similar, just like all of the work that auto marketing is similar. So like, what are you going to say that's going to make you stick apart? And I think actually the more fundamental question is like, how are you going to say it that's
right.
different? Think about the Lexus or Infiniti commercials when they first hit. They were really unique, and like people tuned in just because the delivery method was really unique.
That's great. Yeah. I think there's so many ways that we can kind of look at that. And I agree with you that I think sometimes looking outside of our own bubble is so valuable. And I think that's a great idea.
We talk a lot about it on the show. Schools are really struggling today to make the same ad spend work. CPMs are up 89% year over year on Facebook and Instagram. Our college clients are no longer looking for rented audiences. They're looking for an owned community where they can engage students even before they apply. This is why Zemi has become so crucial for our clients. With over 1 million students, close to 10,000 five-star ratings, consistently ranked as one of the top social apps, and recently one of Apple's hot apps of the week, there simply isn't anything out there like it, and we have seen it all. Zemi not only provides the best space for student engagement, but the most unique and actionable data for their 160 college and university partners. We know firsthand from our clients that Zemi is a must-have strategy for Gen Z. Check them out now at colleges.zemi.com. That's colleges.zeemee.com. And yes, tell them Bart and Troy sent you. If you have a conversation with Chris, his overall value that he will bring to that conversation is convincing marketers that they should speak and think more strategically instead of tactically.
I think you summed it up in a nutshell. I mean, Troy, you should print T-shirts and just like sell them, like that say just that, right? And I will say I learned this lesson from experience. So I have been in the tactical camp for many years. And over the course of my career, I figured out why the strategic camp is a more powerful one and how to get there. But here's what I mean. I think that we in communications do so much good work. And I see communications, and I think other people probably do too, as a business function, not necessarily a service function. And I don't mean business in the big B, like we're here to make the money. I mean like we're here to help drive an organization forward. And we will always have a service capacity in that, if something comes up that's immediate, which it always does in our field, we jump on that thing, whether it's an opportunity or a challenge. But a lot of times what happens, I think, for communicators across the board, not just in education, is that we think about ourselves in this tactical sense. So if somebody says to us, here's a prime example. A communicator might say, I want to get us in the New York Times. And, leadership might say, well, that sounds great. Why? And some communicators, and used to be me, would say, well, because it's the New York Times. It's a really important media outlet. And that is a true statement. But that is a totally tactical way of working at it. And the people that are outside communications, like they don't think tactically and they don't understand things the way we understand them. It's the same thing as if I said to somebody in leadership, we got 5,000 impressions on this particular ad. inside a communications meeting, that has value. But like if I'm going to go talk to someone in leadership or someone in another part of the organization, what they want to know is, number one, how our work relates to the strategic goals or the strategic plan for the organization. And two, they want to know the impact that it had, not the reach, the impact. Impressions is reach. People taking action is impact. And so to me, I think in communications, in marketing, it's really important that we present ourselves in a way that is strategic and linked to the overall goals of the organization. And I think that's especially true in engineering, just like it is if you work at a pharmaceutical company or you work at a telecom company, or you work in healthcare, in education healthcare. Those people that work in those disciplines are process-oriented thinkers, right? Linear process-oriented thinkers. Communicators, for the most part, are circular thinkers. And there's nothing wrong with that. It takes both to drive the world forward. But you can't communicate the work you're doing this way to an audience that thinks this way. So you've got to find ways to make your work, to describe your work, in a way that is linear and process-oriented. It has links back to bigger tent poles than just we're putting up a Twitter post. Sorry, I totally went on a soapbox.
No, that's exactly, that's so important because I see so many times, and I think that agencies that support higher education are guilty of this as well, where I'll see reports from different, it's a digital agency or whatever, and they so focused on the clicks or the impressions or all the other things, the things you just talked about. But at the end of the day, I think that, as higher ed marketers, we owe it to ourselves to go to that level of strategy and the strategic level of thinking and say, how did we move the needle today?
Right.
And like you said, it's like, what is the impact rather than what's that, impression? And, the more people we have on a school visit, or the more people that we have that have actually taken the call to action of applying or, requesting more information or depositing or whatever metric we want to use, we've got to be able to measure that impact and tie that directly back to the tactics that we did. And I think that when we can do that, that's when strategy starts to happen and when we can be strategic, because, we can spend all day long, what I call moving the deck chairs on the Titanic. And it's just like, we have these impressions, we have this, and,
right.
Oh, isn't it great? But at the end of the day, if we don't have students showing up and, and moving the mission of the school forward, we're just messing around.
Yeah.
And we're just doing a lot of busy work.
Yeah, there's a quick good test that, I would encourage people to use, and I'm sure there's a lot of the audience that's already using it. When you're thinking about doing something, whatever the something is, it's easy to ask yourself what you're doing. And let me rephrase that. It is often easier to ask yourself what, but step back and say why. Why is the relevant question. Are we doing this to drive the strategic plan forward? Are we doing this because it links to some other higher initiative that we're trying to launch? Make sure you've got a good answer to the why, not only for yourself so that you know what you're doing, but so that you can explain it to other people in a way that makes sense to them.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah.
I love that. Start with the why. I think that's a great way to go with that.
There's a book with the title Playing to Win that Chris is a big believer in and recommends to marketers that he speaks to. Chris, what is it about this book that makes it so impactful?
So I was first introduced to this book several years ago when I worked for Novozymes, which is a global biotech company. And the book basically, at its most foundational level, is about corporate strategy. But really what the book is about, at least to me as reading it as a communications person, is how do you think and communicate in a strategic way? So as an example, most people, let me rephrase that. There's an opportunity in communications when you're putting together a new initiative, like to think about, but your goal, okay, here's the goal, here's the objectives, great. But what this book, I think, really forces you to think about is can you think one level up? So in other words, what's the ambition? The goal and the ambition are different, right? The goal is what you want to get done with the particular effort that you're undertaking. The ambition is like, if everything went to plan, if you had all the people, all the resources, all the time that you needed, what would the outcome look like? And the reason it's important to map that out is because it really makes you think about ultimately what you're driving for. Because ultimately, you're not necessarily just driving for that goal. You're driving to move the needle in some bigger way, like we've just been talking about. And I think what the book forces you to think about is, how do I get into that mindset? And then how do I communicate in that mindset? And it's a really interesting read. So I would encourage folks, I know that we don't all have a lot of free time, but if you have downtime and books on like corporate strategy like that are interesting for you, check it out. There's a process that it talks through about how to think in a strategic way, from like big to much more focused. And there's a way that I found to adapt it for communications that works really well. And I'm sure other people will be able to do the same, but it is really good in helping to train people to think in the ways we've been talking about for the last couple of minutes here.
That's great. I think that resources like that, and I think that, that book, I think, is a great way kind of moving yourself up on the ambition. But then also, like we talked earlier about, the pitch and other, looking for those places outside of what we do every day to kind of challenge us to move up the ladder for strategy, I think is so critical. So that's great. Good.
Yeah. And there's another relevant example on that, okay. So a lot of times let me again rephrase that. Sometimes I don't want to overgeneralize. Sometimes we in communications have this tendency that we think about, okay, here's our strategy, here's the audience, and then here are the tactics we're going to deploy. First of all, those should really be flipped. The audience should dictate the strategy. But the second thing is that sometimes we get in this mode where we go like, regardless of the different audience segments, we're going to run the same strategy and the same tactics. And like that again, that's not a strategic way of looking at it. So you got to say to yourself, okay, for this particular effort, whatever the effort is, there's 3 distinct audiences. If there are 3 distinct audiences, we need to have 3 distinct strategies and 3 distinct lines of tactics, 3 sets of deliverables, 3 sets of measures. That's the only way you really move the needle. And it's more granular than I think sometimes we force ourselves to go. But to Bart's point earlier about like impact, it's the only way to really make impact is to align the very particular things with the very particular audience. So it just, again, it goes back to the idea from the book, and it goes back to the thing we talked about earlier about being strategic versus tactical. The more you can force yourself to be granular and linear and link back to big things, the more detailed and well thought your strategy will get.
Chris, we end every episode by asking this question to our guest. If there's a piece of advice or an idea that you could share with marketers that would have immediate impact for their career or life or their processes, what would that be?
Can I share 2?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. One would be, and I am sure there are plenty of really, really good folks out there doing this already, but it's just, I think, a good reminder. Do everything you can to put your teams, coworkers, student workers, all of it, in a position where they've got good work-life balance, where they feel valued, where they have room to do what it is that they do best. There are plenty of things that I think I do well as a leader. There's plenty of things that I know I need to work on as a leader. But I think one of the things that I try to do is like just get out of my people's way, like remove roadblocks and like let them do what they're good at doing. And I would just encourage everybody, as much as you can, do that. It just, you've got great people, let them work. Second, much more tactically, keep a folder on your desk of great ideas. It can be things that you pull out of a magazine. It can be, my wife and I were at this restaurant in New York, and they had this coaster that I thought from a design perspective was really cool. I took the coaster, they looked at me a little nuts when I told them I wanted the coaster. It can be things that you see online and print out. It can be photos you take and just print out, but like have a physical, not a computer drive, like have a physical idea folder. And anytime you're thinking, let me rephrase that. Once every regular interval, whatever that is for you, once every 2 weeks or whatever, once a month, go in there and thumb through it. Invariably, you'll see something that will spur a thought. It may not work for you at that particular time. You may just bookmark it and go, and I'm going to come back to that. But it is the best way I have found to, like, very practically, going back to the beginning of our conversation, find things that help set you apart. It's easy to like say that, get lost, but if you make it really practical and really easy, it can actually be kind of a fun journey.
That's great. Chris, I have to tell you that you brought that up in our pre-interview, and everybody can't see it because we aren't on video. But I have created my idea folder, and I've already started putting things in it this past week. So thanks for that real practical tip.
Happy to do it.
Chris, for any of our listeners that would like to reach out to you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
You are welcome to email me. My email is csbender, BENDER, @umd.edu, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. Either one of those works.
Thank you, Chris. You are so fun to talk to and to listen to, and thank you for sharing the impactful wisdom that you did.
By all means, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with everybody, and I'm going to go check on my houseplant.
Bart, what are your final thoughts?
I just want to, again, thank Chris for being on the show today. I think he's just brought a wealth of experience and knowledge to the podcast, and I'm grateful for that. This is one of those episodes that we didn't necessarily get into tactics of, hey, here's 6 the ways that you can do social media better, or here's 9 ways to better do your messaging. Those are tactics, and I think those have places, and a lot of our episodes have that. But one of the things I think that this episode particularly did that I really value, and I've had that from other guests as well, is taking us to that next level up of the why. And I think that Chris made some really good points about, really starting with that why, and even to the point of, why do we do this podcast? Why are we doing what we're doing? It's to really impact higher ed marketers and everyone who's listening to do our job better, to have a greater voice at the table. We've talked to a lot of different people, whether it's, Ethan Braden at Purdue or Jamie Hunt at Miami, these different chief marketing officers, and how quickly they say how important it is for marketers to have a voice at the table and to really be able to represent that well and be able to help everyone understand that what we do does move business forward, as Chris kind of illustrated in there. So I think that's really important, and it's also very important as we really become more strategic that we show how our work has strategic impact, rather than just, sometimes we get kind of we've always talked about it before in my company is, we like to wear the beret sometimes, and it's like, okay, it's fun to wear the beret and win the art awards and the design awards, but at the end of the day, are we impacting the bottom line of our institutions, and are we really moving forward what the institution's all about? And I really think that was some great things that Chris brought up. And I really love the idea of really kind of moving beyond just our goals and looking at ambition. What is it at the end of the day that when we put our heads on our pillows at night, what are we most proud of that we can say, what, this really happened, and this was something that my team was able to do and make a big impact in not only the lives of our institution, but in the lives of the students that we serve. So, Chris, thanks again for bringing your wisdom to the show, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone's learned something, and I'm looking forward to learning from your other guests and your audience as well.
Great, thanks.
The Higher Ed Marketer podcast is brought to you by Kaler Solutions, an education marketing and branding agency, and by Think Patented, a marketing execution company combining print and digital assets for higher impact within your communications. On behalf of Bart Kaler, I'm Troy Singer. Thank you for joining us.
You've been listening to The Higher Ed Marketer. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you're listening with Apple Podcasts, we'd love for you to leave a quick rating of the show. Simply tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. Until next time.